The Curse of King Tutankhamun's tomb, the desert was silent. Only the dry wind moved through the Valley of the Kings, carrying with it whispers of forgotten pharaohs. For centuries, men had searched this valley, cutting into the earth, uncovering tombs, and looting treasures once meant to last for eternity. But by the early 20th century, most believed the valley had no more secrets to give. Every tomb had been opened, every chamber emptied. Every king's resting place had been violated, or so it seemed. Yet one man refused to accept that. Howard Carter, an English archaeologist, had spent years chasing what others called a myth, an untouched tomb still sealed, hidden somewhere beneath the sands. The tomb of a forgotten boy king, Tutankhamun. Carter's obsession was unshakable. He believed Tutankhamun's resting place still existed, waiting in the shadows. But years passed. His funding dwindled. His reputation was mocked. Even his patron, Lord Carnarvon, grew restless. It was the winter of 1922 when everything changed. Carter's workers were digging near the base of a barren cliff. The sun was merciless. The ground was rock and rubble. Most believed the site was empty, but then one worker's tool struck stone. A step cut into the bedrock. The men froze. Carter leaned forward, his heart racing. Could this be another false trail? Another empty shaft? He brushed away the sand with trembling hands. More steps appeared. Downward, deeper into the earth. A staircase, hidden for over 3,000 years. Day after day, the men cleared rubble from the shaft. And then, at last, they reached the doorway, sealed with plaster, stamped with a royal insignia. The name read clearly, Tutankhamun. The world seemed to stop. Carter's breath caught in his throat. He had found it, the tomb of the boy king. The tomb no one thought existed. He sent word immediately to Lord Carnarvon in England. At last, had made a wonderful discovery in Valley, a magnificent tomb with seals intact. The news swept across the globe. Reporters, adventurers, and scholars rushed toward Egypt, desperate to witness history. But no one knew what awaited inside. On November 26, 1922, Carter, Carnarvon, and a small team gathered before the sealed doorway. The air was tense, heavy with centuries of silence. Carter lit a candle. With a small chisel, he cut a hole through the plaster. The moment had come. He pressed his eye against the opening. What he saw defied imagination. Golden statues, strange animals carved in ebony, jewels, chariots, and glittering treasures stacked to the ceiling. Everything untouched. Everything was as it had been left more than 3,000 years before. Behind him, Carnarvon's voice broke the silence. "Can you see anything?" Carter's words trembled. "Yes, wonderful things." The tomb was real. The legend was alive. But even as the world celebrated, even as the press hailed Carter as the greatest archaeologist of the age, strange unease lingered in the air. Egyptians in the valley whispered warnings. This tomb was not meant to be disturbed. It was said that ancient curses were carved upon the walls of such resting places, promising death to those who trespassed. Carter laughed at such talk. To him, this was science, not superstition. He pressed forward. The team entered chamber after chamber, marveling at the treasures of Egypt's lost golden age. But each discovery only raised more questions. Why had this boy king, dead at just 19, been buried with such extraordinary wealth? Why had his name been erased from monuments across Egypt, as though history itself had tried to forget him? And most chilling of all, why had this tomb remained hidden, when almost every other had been plundered long ago? The deeper they went, the heavier the air became. The candle flames trembled. Every step felt as though unseen eyes were watching. Finally, after weeks of clearing the outer chambers, Carter and his men stood before another sealed door. The innermost chamber, the burial chamber. They cut through, and there, in the flickering light, they saw the great stone sarcophagus, Tutankhamun's eternal prison. The boy king was before them at last. Yet in that moment, as silence filled the chamber, a shadow passed over Lord Carnarvon's face. He wiped his brow. His breathing was heavy, and though no one noticed then, it was the beginning of something darker. For within days, the curse of the tomb would begin to unfold, and death would follow. But was it only a coincidence? Or had the ancient king truly reached out from beyond the grave to punish those who disturbed his rest? The world would soon find out. Teaser. When the first death struck, it was sudden, mysterious, almost impossible to explain. And it was only the beginning. The first death came quickly. It was early 1923. Lord Carnarvon, the man who financed the entire expedition, was in Cairo. At first, it seemed nothing serious. Just a mosquito bite on his cheek. Small, harmless, forgettable. But the bite became infected. Fever set in. His strength faded rapidly. Doctors tried everything, but nothing worked. On April 5th, 1923, Lord Carnarvon died. The moment the news spread, the whispers began. Reporters seized upon it instantly. The curse of the Pharaoh, the headlines declared. Egyptian locals nodded grimly. They had warned the foreigners. They had spoken of an ancient curse, carved into the tomb. Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king. Carter denied it. He claimed no curse was found in the tomb, no inscription at all. But the press didn't care. The story of a supernatural curse was far more thrilling than archaeology. And then, stranger things began to happen. The very night Carnarvon died, all the lights in Cairo are said to have gone out. Every lamp across the city extinguished at once. At Carnarvon's estate in England, his beloved dog let out a terrible howl, then collapsed dead at the very same hour. Coincidence? Or a curse reaching across continents? Other deaths followed. George J. Gould, a wealthy American financier who visited the tomb, fell ill immediately after leaving. He died soon after pneumonia. Arthur Mace, a member of Carter's team, grew weak and sickly. He, too, was dead within months. Prince Ali Camelfami Bey, an Egyptian prince who mocked the discovery, was shot dead by his wife in a bizarre scandal. One by one, anyone tied to the tomb seemed to meet strange, untimely ends. The newspapers counted them carefully, adding fuel to the fire. The curse claims another victim. The world was captivated. Was the boy king truly striking back from beyond the grave? Even some scientists grew uneasy. Insects, disease, hidden toxins sealed in the tomb for centuries. Many theories emerged to explain the deaths, but none could explain the timing. None could explain the shadows that seemed to follow those who had entered Tutankhamun's resting place. And still, Carter pushed forward. He refused to believe in curses. He refused to stop. For him, this was history, pure, undeniable. The treasures of Tutankhamun were too great, too important to abandon. Yet even Carter could not deny the feeling that grew heavier with each passing week. Every time they pried open a door, every time they lifted another artifact from the earth, the air seemed to change. Cold, still, watching. Some workers refused to continue. They whispered prayers under their breath. Others fled the valley altogether. Inside the tomb, strange accidents occurred. Tools slipped, stones fell, shadows flickered where no light should have been. And at night, some swore they heard faint footsteps in the sand outside the tomb, though no one was there. The curse, whether real or imagined, had taken root. It was no longer just a story in the newspapers. It was a presence, a shadow that hung over every man who dared touch the treasures of the Boy King. And perhaps the most unsettling question of all was this: why Tutankhamun? Why had this young pharaoh, who died mysteriously at just 19, been buried with such enormous wealth? Why had his name been erased from temples, his memory nearly destroyed, as if someone had wanted him forgotten forever? Had he been murdered, betrayed? And had his restless spirit been waiting all along for vengeance? The curse was not just a story of death. It was a story of silence. A silence that stretched across 3,000 years, only to break when the tomb was opened. And once broken, it could not be contained. As more deaths piled up, as more strange events unfolded, the line between superstition and reality blurred. Carter found himself at the center of something he could not control. The world was no longer celebrating his discovery. The world was holding its breath. Because if the curse was real, if death truly followed those who dared disturb Tutankhamun, then how many more would fall before the tomb was finished being emptied? And who would be next? Teaser. The deaths would not stop. One by one, the curse claimed more lives. And soon, even those closest to Carter himself would not escape its reach. The curse did not fade. It grew. By 1924, the world's fascination had turned to dread. Every new headline seemed to carry another grim tally, another name added to the growing list of victims. The tomb of Tutankhamun had become a spectacle not of gold, but of death. And still Howard Carter pressed on. He told reporters it was all nonsense, coincidence, exaggeration, superstition. Yet, privately, he was weary. Too many of his colleagues were falling. Too many strange events followed in their wake. Arthur Mace, one of Carter's most trusted assistants, wasted away slowly, his health crumbling without explanation. Colonel Aubrey Herbert, Lord Carnarvon's own half-brother, went blind and soon died, barely 5 months after Carnarvon himself. Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, a radiologist who had x-rayed the mummy, fell suddenly ill and died without warning. The whispers grew louder. Every time another coffin closed, the same question was asked. Was this the curse of the Boy King? Even those who had mocked the idea now felt a chill. And as the bodies piled higher, the curse became less a myth and more a pattern. Reporters hunted the stories relentlessly. Pharaoh's curse strikes again, splashed across newspapers from London to New York. People who had never heard of Tutankhamun before now spoke of him in fearful tones, as though the Boy King himself had returned from the dead to punish the living. And Carter? He continued working day after day, stripping treasures from the tomb, cataloging each item, preparing them for museums. His obsession never faltered. But those around him were not so strong. The Egyptian workers murmured prayers every time they descended the steps. Some refused to enter at all. One man claimed to see strange lights flickering inside the burial chamber when it was sealed tight. Another swore he heard a faint, ghostly cry echoing from within the sarcophagus. And always, the deaths continued. Richard Bethel, Carter's personal secretary, was found dead in his bed, smothered in his sleep. He had been young, healthy, and terrified of the tomb. Now, his name was added to the list. Soon after, Bethel's father left from a building in London, overcome with grief or fear. Some whispered the curse had claimed them both. The line between accident and omen blurred further with every tragedy. And yet, not everyone suffered. Howard Carter himself, the man at the very center of the storm, remained alive, calm, focused, unharmed. Why? If the curse was real, why had it not touched him? Some said it was because he had been chosen by the king, the one man who truly respected the treasures. Others said the boy king was saving Carter for last. By now, the treasure of Tutankhamun had been packed and prepared for transport. Gold masks, statues, weapons, even the great sarcophagus itself. All were pried from the tomb and prepared for display. But with every artifact removed, the weight of the curse seemed heavier. Carter dismissed it publicly, but privately, even he could not ignore one chilling truth. Too many men were dead, and their deaths all followed one act, entering Tutankhamun's tomb. And then came the moment of greatest dread, when the lid of the innermost coffin was finally lifted. When the mummy itself was revealed, the team gathered in silence. The boy king lay shrouded, his face hidden beneath the golden mask that would become one of the most famous images in the world. But Carter noticed something odd: a wound on the skull, burn marks on the flesh. The body itself seemed unnaturally charred, as though Tutankhamun had not simply died. He had been killed and buried in haste. Theories raced through Carter's mind. Had Tutankhamun been murdered? Had his burial been cursed from the very start? And if so, was the curse not an accident but a warning? The chamber fell cold. Some swore the candle flames flickered violently. Others claimed they heard a low groan echo through the stone. And in that silence, the curse no longer felt like superstition. It felt alive. The boy king had been disturbed, and death was his answer, teaser. But the curse was not finished. Even after the tomb was emptied, even after decades passed, strange deaths and mysteries would continue to haunt those who crossed Tutankhamun's path. And the final twist would leave the world asking, was the curse real all along? The years passed. The tomb of Tutankhamun was emptied, its treasures shipped across seas, locked behind the glass of great museums. The golden mask of the boy king became a symbol of Egypt itself, admired by millions. And yet, wherever those treasures traveled, the whispers followed. The Curse of Tutankhamun was no longer just a story from the sands. It had become part of global legend, a shadow that clung to every artifact, every scholar, every exhibition. And still, the deaths came. Richard Bethel Sutton smothering in London was not the end. His father's mysterious fall from a building only added fuel to the curse's flames. Sir Lee Stack, Governor General of Sudan, was assassinated in Cairo shortly after visiting the tomb. Even Carter's friend, Sir Douglas Reed, who had been among the first to examine the mummy, died after a sudden illness. Each obituary added to the tally. Each tragedy deepened the mystery. The newspapers claimed 30, sometimes 40 names as victims of curse. Some counts went higher, spinning tales of doom that reached far beyond the original expedition. And yet through it all, one man remained untouched: Howard Carter himself. For years, skeptics pointed to him as proof that the curse was nothing more than hysteria. He had been the first to peer inside the tomb, the first to touch the treasures, the man who had orchestrated the entire excavation. If the curse were real, surely he would have fallen first. But Carter lived on. He wrote books. He lectured to packed audiences. He oversaw the treasures in museums. And when he finally died in 1939, it was of natural causes. 64 years old. No mysterious accident. No sudden illness. Just death, ordinary and unremarkable. And yet, even that death carried a shadow. Some said Carter had been spared because the boy king had chosen him as his messenger, his prophet. Others whispered Carter had been protected by ancient rites he himself did not understand. And some believed Tutankhamun was patient, waiting, letting the curse outlast the man who dared disturb him. But perhaps the most unsettling detail was this. Carter died almost alone, shunned by many colleagues who no longer wished to be near him. The man who uncovered the greatest treasure of the modern world ended his life in silence. Was that the curse after all? Even beyond Carter's death, the legend only deepened. In the decades that followed, every new examination of Tutankhamun seemed to raise more questions. X-rays of the mummy revealed fractures in the skull. Some claimed it was evidence of murder. Others said the body had been burned by a botched mummification ritual, its flesh charred by chemical reaction. Still others pointed to Tutankhamun's fragile body, his deformed foot, his illness. Had he died by weakness or by violence? And was the curse itself his final act of vengeance against a world that had tried to erase him? The tomb's treasures themselves seemed restless. In the 1960s, when Tutankhamun's mask and relics were sent abroad on exhibition, strange mishaps followed. Planes carrying the artifacts were struck by storms. Museums that displayed them reported sudden power failures and strange accidents among staff. Even the Louvre in Paris, where the treasures were briefly displayed, recorded an unusual fire alarm the very night the relics arrived. Coincidence? Perhaps. But to those who remember the deaths of the 1920s, it was proof. The curse still lived. Even into the 21st century, the shadow of Tutankhamun lingers. In 2007, when scientists once again examined the mummy with modern technology, the equipment malfunctioned repeatedly, as though something resisted the intrusion. In 2010, a team investigating his DNA discovered traces of malaria, evidence of a life plagued with illness. But when they published their findings, critics accused him of errors, even deceit. The boy king, it seemed, refused to let his secrets rest. And then came 2020. As Egypt prepared to move Tutankhamun's treasures to a new museum in Cairo, a series of strange events occurred. Fires, floods, even the blocking of the Suez Canal by a stranded ship. Egyptians, half joking but half serious, began to ask, had the curse been disturbed again? The boy king still haunted the living, and perhaps he always will, because the curse of Tutankhamun is not just about death. It is about mystery, about the fear of the unknown, about the weight of history pressing down upon those who dare to touch it. Howard Carter once said the tomb held wonderful things. He was right. But perhaps the most wonderful and the most terrifying thing of all is the truth we may never know. Did the boy king die of illness? By betrayal? By murder? Was his tomb truly cursed? Or was it all a coincidence twisted into legend? And if the curse is only a myth, why does it still send a shiver down the spine a century later? The Valley of the Kings still sleeps under the desert sun. But somewhere beneath its shifting sands, Tutankhamun waits. His mask of gold still gleams in the dark, his secret still locked away. And maybe, just maybe, his curse is waiting too.